Hello, I'm Joe from Carême cooking classes, and today we're doing the apple pie video. Okay, so we got the first part is the pastry, and then the apples, and then putting it together. It's not too tricky. We're going to use the food processor for the pastry, which is short pastry, and it does a better job. It doesn't get bored like you do. You just push the button and it keeps going. Fairly straightforward. Okay, so we're using plain flour. We want 450 grams of plain flour. You definitely want plain flour for this one. Plain flour is lower gluten, and lower gluten means that you always want lower gluten for cakes and pastries and stuff like that, because it won't be chewy. That's our idea. Here's 450 grams. We'll put them in, put that in. And then we want 250 grams of butter, and we want the butter to be as cold as possible, so we've left it in the fridge. I've got a 250 gram packet because that's what they had at Penn & Kershaw. Normally, obviously I use 500 gram packets, but today they had, when I was shopping, they had 250 gram packets. In my recipes, I always say to cut it into 16 pieces, but what I mean is cut it into small pieces. And you want the butter to be as cold as possible. You want everything to be as cold as possible, really. But particularly the butter. Frozen is not a bad thing. I'm used to cutting, obviously, with 500 grams, but this will work fine. What I mean is small pieces. Plus a minute. The other advantage of the processor is that it doesn't get, you don't transfer heat from your fingers. You think that you're not hot, but you are. Okay, a bit of noise. Ready? I always tilt it up because otherwise it tends to not mix nicely. I find it takes about 30 seconds of processing to mix like rub the butter in nicely. Now, of course, I've lost count. What we're looking for is the butter. I'm not sure you'll be able to see this. No, I can feel bits of butter in there. It's definitely not done enough. It's starting to turn yellow, but you don't want to feel any bits of butter, and you want it to look. Recipes say breadcrumbs, but I always think that ground almonds is a better description. Get them back on. Yeah. That's better. Yep. That's good. That to me is looking like ground almonds, and it feels softer. You want it to be cool and soft like snow. That to me looks like ground almonds. So we want to back on. Yeah. Nice processor, by the way. That's the Magic Mix. Beautiful machines. So we want some sugar in there next. Depends on, I mean, you can vary the amount of sugar a bit. I normally say 160 grams, but you can put a bit more if you want. Especially for apple pie, which doesn't have a lot of sugar in the filling. Oops, a bit of vanilla in there, won't kill us. Just mix that in a bit. And then we want the liquid. We've got a carefully measured amount of liquid, 1 size 7 egg. So we wanted to do a lot of mixing once before, at the beginning to rub the butter in, but once you've got the liquid in, you're not allowed to do too much mixing. Overmixed pastry is a crime against pastry. mixing up from the edges. I'll just get a fork on. You can see how it's got a bit mixed down the bottom. It's quite warm today in the kitchen. I closed the windows because the wind was making noise. But now the eggs got stuck down the bottom. Pastry likes a cold kitchen. Pastry likes a cool kitchen, cool hands and cool surfaces. Don't mix it too much. Just checking that it's all mixed through. Should be. Now, once we've got it so that it will stick together and hold its shape well, just stop. You don't over-mix pastry. As I say, it's a crime against pastry. Just remember that Carême was a pastry chef. He was fairly fussy, I believe. A fairly long time ago, but I think he had a bit of a reputation. Oh dear. A lot of recipes say that from now you should form it into a ball, put it into the fridge, leave it there to chill off well, and then bring it back again to room temperature and then roll it out. I don't do that, but if you do, it will hydrate the flour and relax the gluten, which are all good things, but it takes ages. So I just shape it from now. You can do it the other way, and that's a good thing, but my way's damn sight fast, I tell you. We're going to make a small apple pie because I don't have millions of apples at home. I've got a cute little tin. I happen to have it at home. And we're going to shape it straight from here, so it's not going to be, we're going to shape it just from the lumpy pastry like that. Going to take some pastry like this, and if you can see it, which you should be able to, I'm going to squish it up around the walls of the tin. Like when you're shaping a cheesecake base, you often do this. Just push it up around the walls of the tin. There is a bit of practice involved in this. The first 100 that you do are always the hardest. But I've done more than 100. So mine should be alright. And what you're looking for, especially with the walls, is thin and even, of course. Good luck on that. If you find that it's sticking to your fingers, which it does a bit, then you're allowed to put a bit of flour on your fingers. And that will really help. Because you want it to be thin and even, especially around the bottom. That's where you tend to, when you're not brilliant at this, that's where you tend to get lumpy bits. Okay, so we've got it. Now, if there's any question of pushing down or pushing up, you push up, like you build up the walls. There we go. We're just going around it again to make sure it's thin and even. It's thin and even. Now, it's a bit lumpy at the top, right? But we're going to fix that. We've got a system. We've got a knife, just a normal table knife, and we run our knife around at about the right height, what we think we're going to be the finished height of our apple pie. It's harder on a small tin though, I must say. And then that drops down to the bottom to make part of the base. You probably can't see. See? Yeah. And then just neaten those edges a little bit. Yep. And then put some more in for the bottom. And squish it in with your hands. And once again, if you need a little bit of flour, you're allowed. It's so much easier to shape when the pastry is soft like this. A little bit of flour. There we go. But once again, remember that the edges want to be not too fat, because they'll take, if they do, they'll take a lot longer to cook. If it's even, it'll cook evenly. Okay, pretty pleased with that. But, you know, you're allowed to work it a little bit. Don't spend hours doing it. But that's fairly even. There we go, tidy enough, but fairly easy. There we go, little bits. Then that goes in the fridge. It must go in the fridge before it's cooked. It doesn't have to go in the fridge, as I say, before you shape it, but it must go into the fridge before it's cooked. And then the rest of this I'm going to leave at room temperature. I'm going to leave it there. Because we're going to, that is going to, the bottom of the pie is going to chill, and then we're going to blind bake that, and then we're going to shape the lid separately, and put the apple in. Right. And then the apples, I'm going to cook off the apples in a pot with some butter at the bottom. I always cook off the apples before they go in the pie. So, pot, butter, this is very complicated. A lump of butter, you know, not rocket science. Any tricks on this? No, not really. No. Oh, I was going to show you, that's right, I was going to show you how I cut apples, because it's faster. If you cut around the core, so here's the apple, if you cut it so that you leave a square core, that's faster. Then you've got these ones, you line them up, and you can cut them. Yeah. It is faster, especially if you're doing a lot. There we go. I'll do the rest of them. I've got 5 apples, and I'll just cook them, stir them up, cook them, and drain them, and then I'll come back in a bit. And I'll come back and get the pastry and put it in the oven. Okay, I did that, and the next thing is very easy. It's just to put the pie case in the oven. Here it is. It's been in the fridge, so it's quite hard. Absolute minimum of 15 minutes, but really you want a minimum of 30 minutes. And I'll put it in the oven then tell you. About 12 minutes in the oven, but you want it to be just browning around the edges. I never do that thing of putting baking paper and beans in. I give it a stern look and I say don't fall down, and the edges don't fall down. I have confidence. Just remember about pastry, pastry can smell fear. Coming back in a minute to do the lid. Here we go, the pastry's cooked. It took 12.5 minutes, but I don't know if you can see, but the pastry is just nicely, slightly browning around the top. It's just spot on. If there were any cracks, it didn't fall down, the sides didn't fall down, you see, I had confidence. My confidence was rewarded. If it had any cracks, I would have patched them as soon as it came out of the oven with raw pastry, and it would have stemmed the flow of anything that wanted to come out when it was cooking the second time, just say. It's not so important for this one, but if you're making a quiche, it's quite important. So we're going to put the apples in and put the top on. Apples got cooked also. Put half the apples in, there's some sugar. This is very complicated. You can measure the sugar or you can not measure the sugar. I never do, of course. Now I have to remember it's only a small pie, so not too much sugar. I normally do a bigger pie, and that much pastry is actually correct for a pie one. That's a 23 centimetre pie, well, pie it's cooked in, of course. 23 centimetre, this one is 18 centimetre. So we are going to end up with a bit of pastry left over. but that's not a crime. Okay, that is the correct amount of apples. And some more sugar, a couple of spoons of sugar each time. More, of course, for a bigger pie. Then we want to roll out the pastry for the top. Now for this one we do have to roll it. So here's the rest of the pastry. As I say, we're not going to need all of it. We're going to squish it together into a lump. With pastry you have to be firm but gentle. You have to have confidence but not too much confidence. Pastry can tell. You think the pastry is an inanimate object, but it's not. A little bit of flour top and bottom. Rolling out pastry is a real skill. Squish it a few times across the top. That'll start it off nicely. And then it's got raggedy bits, so squish them together. Just remember who's in charge. If you let the pastry take over, you're dead meat. That's it. Move it around. Pastry, you're allowed to turn it around, but you're never allowed to turn it over. I don't know why. It's one of those rules. And I always find it helpful to roll with flat hands, because then you don't get that smeary sideways pressure. You get top-down pressure, which is what you want. And make sure there's flour top and bottom. There's a little bit there. I'll take it out. An imperfection. We have got far too much pastry, haven't we? I mean, look at the size of the pie, look at how much pastry we've got. Keep the sides, edges reasonably neat. Roll it up. How thick do we want it? I think you'll know. I wouldn't like to say how thick that is. What do you think? 3 mil? I'm guessing there. If you run your hand over it, you can see if it's even. But that's certainly going to be big enough. I'll just check it's not stuck. It's a tiny bit stuck actually. We have a trick for that. My normal trick for that is to have a baking sheet and have flour on it. I've got a small baking sheet at work, and then you slide it under, and it's got to be fairly well floured, and it's a very neat little baking sheet, and it'll just go under, and then it leaves some flour on as you pull it back out. But it's at work and I'm at home. So I'm going to try with this, and we're going to find out if it works. Flour on it. Just going round. Make sure it's got flour on it. Yeah, this is going to work. We're champions. I didn't have enough flour on it as I was rolling. Ah, look. Ha! Fixed it. Now we don't want too much flour on the top, because this is going to be like my top. So I'll brush it off. There we go. Now we want to think about how big our pie is. That big, okay? So we look at it. I know this looks messy, but it's going to be beautiful. And we draw a circle with plain table knife. Confidence. Vital. Bit big. Bit smaller. And a bit more circular. There we go. Okay, as I said, too much pastry. See, it's looking much better now. You thought it wasn't going to work. Now I'm missing my special tool, because normally I use the baking sheet to lift it and carry it. But I haven't got it here. So I'm going to use this one. There we go, you see. Now, it's too big still, so I'm going to go around it with a knife, cut off the edge. Yep. And then go around with fingers and make finger marks to push it down. You can just use one finger, but I use 3 because it's faster. And then all we're going to do is make a steam hole and stick them in the oven. See? Ha! I don't normally, just taking that little flower off the top, I don't normally brush it with egg or anything like that. I just put it in the oven like that. It takes a surprising amount of time the second time. It takes about 30 or even 40 minutes. The first time I was cooking it at, I think it's about 175, and the second time I wanted it to be just slightly lower, 165 to 170. But make sure that the top is brown, because if the pastry is soggy, it's not as nice. Right, back in the oven. And we'll come back when it's cooked. Let's just make sure it's cooked. Pie's out of the oven. He looks gorgeous and nicely browned, you see. It took 35 minutes in the oven. The oven was about 175 degrees. So I'm just going to cut a piece just to show you. I hope it's good. I didn't say, but it is a springform tin, so I always use springform tins. They're just much easier. It beautifully cooked on the outside. Use a serrated knife. I have had it out of the oven for 10 minutes or so, just to let it settle a bit. There we go. Well, I cut it a decent sort of slice because it's quite a small pie. And I've been looking forward to this. And also, I also didn't say, that's what I meant to say, I didn't grease the tin, but pastry like this, it's got plenty of butter in it, it's not going to stick. And even my pastry will shrink a tiny little bit, so it sort of self-releases. And it did. It's come away nicely. Also, it's a non-stick pie. Cake tin. That is a nice pie. The apples are nicely cooked. Pastry is good. It's very nice actually. Yeah, I'm pretty pleased with that. There we go. Apple pie. Thanks for watching. See you again soon.